Welcome to Tea Talks, where young adult stories and church experience come together into a blendful insight to inspire us. So grab a cup of tea, sit down, relax, and enjoy while we spill the tea. I have here with me today my friend Ashley, and I am so excited for you to get to know her a little better. Ashley, thank you. Thank you for accepting the invitation to be part of this video series. So tell us a little bit more about you.
Of course. Thank you so much for this invitation. It truly means the world to me. Well, my name is Ashley Perez, and I'm 20 years old. I'm a first-gen Afro-Latina. My parents came from Dominican Republic, and they're a wild group. They specialize in comedy, fun, love, and they've definitely instilled that in me. I've grown in a Christian home my whole life, and it's been an incredible blessing to me. Currently, I am a preschool teacher at a Christian academy, and that has been a great blessing. And that's a little bit about me.
That is wonderful. Wow. Dominican and preschool teacher.
Right.
That is fantastic. Ashley, as a young adult, one of the things, by the way, the whole series is based on this book called Growing Young. And one of the things that they noticed as they were doing the research that for young people to stay in church is to have a warm community. Share with us your experience. If you did find a warm community or if you did not, what has been your experience in the topic of warm community?
An experience that I have with a warm community is a time where I entered a newly planted church. And I found that from the second that I walked in, everyone was incredibly kind. Everyone was incredibly loving. As soon as I walked in, all eyes were on me, but it was a judgment-free zone.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yes, as I started communicating with the leaders in that church and that location, I truly felt that their interest was to help me grow spiritually. And
that is amazing.
yeah, it's been a great blessing.
Yes. And not everybody can say that. That's why I wanted to talk to people, because one thing is to read a book and to have the theory. But when we actually have people that went through it, and it can confirm, yes, the theory is correct. And how this warm community helped you find your call?
Wow, that is a beautiful question, actually. And honestly, a warm community is essential for the growth, especially of a young person. And when you enter a warm community, here are two examples of something you can find. Vulnerability and transparency.
Oof.
And when I saw that in the adults, the older generation at that church, that they were willing to share their hardships, that they were willing to share their experiences and their love that they had for Jesus, I was impacted immediately. And I just fell in love with everything that it was about. And just seeing that God can work in other people's lives inspired me to keep on moving forward, and inspired me to participate more and to be involved more. And just that great community, pushed me to, like I said, continue participating. And as I began participating, I realized one of my roles as a child of God is to spread the good news. I have to do that. And that's the main thing that I have seen in my journey in a warm community.
And how has that, what did you feel, I have this warm community, they're encouraging me to spread the word of God. What inspired you to do? What are things that you do, or what are things that you desire to do in the future to be able to do this work? Like, what is your call? What did you find it?
Well, that is a beautiful, extravagant question. And here it is. As I began to pursue the calling that God had onto my life, I did find challenges and roadblocks. And a part of me was fearful because I was unsure. And I prayed and I prayed and I said, God, keep opening the doors, keep leading the way, and show me what it is I am called to do. I'm always being placed in a place of leadership, even when I don't want to be. The Lord is like, you have to be right here. And just spreading the word, all of those things has led me to know that the calling that God has for me is to go to school, study theology, and become a pastor.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a lot.
That got me a little emotional.
Right.
But, I'm a little biased,
Right.
being a female pastor.
Of course.
But that's wonderful that you are actually seeking to study theology to become a pastor. That is great. Let me ask you a question that I know this one is a tough one.
Okay.
Have you found any barriers or challenges to be able to fulfill your call?
It's definitely a tough question, and I've definitely found barriers. Not only have I'll put it this way. I've encountered physical barriers in the way of, let's say, family or friends who might be against it. But the biggest barrier that I've encountered has been spiritual.
Oh,
The moment that I made the decision to follow the calling that God placed on my life was the moment that I felt incredibly discouraged the next day, felt just spiritually attacked, felt like I was unworthy, just felt like, I couldn't do it. I felt like the enemy was constantly telling me, oh, you're so silly. That's not going to work for you. Doesn't have that for you. And it was incredibly challenging to overcome that. The things people were saying, family and friends, oh, are you crazy? A woman? Are you crazy? I would brush that off my shoulder, like, no. But when the spiritual warfare began, it truly did become difficult for me. But luckily, I did find refuge in the wings of the Lord, because if it wasn't for God, I don't know what I would have done.
so you were able to overcome those.
That's right,
And
yes.
you're moving forward.
You know it.
I am so happy. I am so excited.
Praise God, yes.
Have you found your community, the warm community that you have mentioned to me before, have they supported you?
Most definitely.
Yes.
And that has also encouraged me to move forward as well. In that warm community, I have the older generation leaders who text me every day, hey, how are things going? Don't forget, you're my pastor, Ashley. Just sending me encouraging messages, or, friends who are going through, difficult challenges at church would be like, hey, Ashley, I know you're going to study theology, so can you help me with this biblical question?
That's awesome.
It's kind of funny because I'm not a Bible expert, but it truly fills my heart to know, like, that they're willing to count on me and that they're willing to also encourage me.
It makes you feel like empowered, right?
Yes,
like the
most
Holy
definitely.
Spirit is leading you and telling you, hey, you are on the right path.
Most
And I know
definitely.
that's a wonderful feeling. What would you say to other young adults that are struggling because they are in a community that is not warm and that is not helping them find their purpose? So what would be your advice to somebody that is going through that?
My advice for someone who's going through those challenges, who's in a community that's not so warm, first I'd like to say that I was in a community like that. And actually the Lord took me out of it, because I know that it can feel like the community is stunting your growth. However, I will say this: pray, pray, pray is the first thing that we have to do. Even when it seems like the whole community, the whole church is against you, God will lift up someone who will have your back. And a lot of times it will be a leader. There will always be at least one leader who's willing to pass down the keys. And, I encourage them to search for that leader, to pray, to, ask God for wisdom on what to do, and to try their best, even when it's difficult, to involve themselves in what the church is doing.
Don't give up just because people are not supporting you, because a lot of times we start questioning, hey, is this not from God? Maybe this is just something out of my own mind. And it doesn't have to be a pastor. It's whatever call that God gave you,
Exactly.
right? And sometimes don't give up. Look for another place. Pray about it and look for a community that will embrace you and support you. That's beautiful.
Definitely.
What can we, now I'm talking about like on the side of a leader in the church, what can the church and us leaders can do to help churches, to help young adults create this warm community that you're talking about?
Well, like I said earlier, I encourage the everyone, especially the older generation and leaders who are already there, to be vulnerable, to be transparent, and to be willing to let the younger generation be involved in big decisions. Have young people in your directives meetings. Have young people, setting up the program. Be willing to hear their ideas. Come together, just meet at a middle ground, right?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
You already said it a lot, because it's true. A lot of times, young people are not giving opportunities, and because the older generation is so afraid that they're going to make mistakes. And guess what? We all make mistakes in all phases of life. Doesn't matter what age we are, right?
Definitely.
So it's pretty much giving opportunities.
Yeah. And I'd also say that I always like to tell the older generation, don't be mistaken. The younger generation is on fire for God. They're hungry for God. They're thirsty for God, and a lot of times, instead of pushing them away, help them find the well of the living water. That's what they need. Sometimes the youngers are pushed away because of the sin they're living in, or just because maybe someone doesn't think they're right for a role. No, what they need is for you to give them the roadmap to find Jesus so that they may have an encounter with him.
I love what you just said there, especially the part that you mentioned that young people are on fire for God. It's a great misconception that young people are not interested in God. A lot of times they are not interested, but other times it's because the older generation will push them away with their attitude. So giving them an opportunity, work with them, walk by their side, teach them, give them an opportunity. That's actually what the Bible tells us to do, right? To make disciples. Ashley, this was wonderful. I love that we had this opportunity to talk. I love that your call is to be a pastor. I love it, and I'm going to be praying for you.
Please do.
Just know that I am also here to help. That's what we want to do. It's create spaces like this so we can change the cultures and create more warm communities. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you for joining ET Talks. Keep stirring up the conversations, embracing the beautiful and the messiness of life. And until next time.